Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we're tackling something that's super important to all of us. I mean, who doesn't want to make things that people actually love to use? But we all know that good design can sometimes be hard to justify, especially when budgets are tight. So how do you actually prove that putting users first is worth the investment? That's what we're digging into today with this source. Measuring impact, proving the value of HCD. Pretty dense read, but we're going to break it down and pull out those juicy nuggets. I think you'll be surprised by what we find.
Yeah, it's definitely a topic that's near and dear to my heart. We're seeing a real shift in how businesses view design. It's no longer just about making things pretty. It's about solving real problems for real people. And when you can actually measure the impact of those solutions, that's when design really starts to shine.
So let's jump right in. The source makes a big deal about measuring the impact of human-centered design. Why is such a crucial conversation?
Well, for a long time, design was often seen as this purely aesthetic thing, like it was just about making things look good. But human-centered design is so much more than that. It's about understanding users' needs and using that understanding to create things that are not only beautiful, but also functional and enjoyable to use. And when we can actually measure the impact of those design choices, we can show the value that design brings to the table.
Okay, so how do we move beyond gut feeling and actually measure the impact of human-centered design?
The key is to use a mix of qualitative and quantitative methods. Think of it like this. Quantitative data, like website analytics, might tell you what people are doing, like how many people are visiting your site or abandoning their shopping carts. But to understand why they're doing those things, you need qualitative data from things like user interviews or usability testing. By combining those two types of data, you get a much richer understanding of how your design is actually impacting users.
I love that. It's like getting the full story, not just a snapshot. Now, the source we're diving into today mentions specific types of metrics. Can we break those down a bit further?
Absolutely. So we've got qualitative metrics. These are all about understanding the user's experience. Things like user interviews, focus groups, usability testing. Then you've got quantitative metrics. These are more about the hard numbers. Things like task completion rates, conversion rates, customer satisfaction scores.
So it sounds like having a whole toolbox of different instruments, each one giving you a different perspective on the design.
Exactly. And just like with any toolbox, you don't always need to use every single tool for every single project. It's about choosing the right tools for the job.
Makes sense. So we've got our qualitative and qualitative metrics. What else is in this HCD measurement toolkit?
Well, there are also things like design ROI frameworks. These can help you calculate the financial return on investment in design, which can be really helpful when you're trying to justify design budgets.
That's super practical. I can definitely see how that would be useful.
And then you've got usability metrics. These are all about how easy and efficient it is to use a product or service. Are people getting stuck? Are they making errors? These metrics can help you identify areas where you can improve the user experience.
So it's about making things as smooth and painless as possible for the user.
Exactly.
I'm guessing user satisfaction metrics are all about how happy people are with what we've designed.
You got it. Metrics like Net Promoter Score or NPS give you a sense of how likely people are to recommend your product or service to others.
Okay, so we've got metrics that tell us how easy something is to use, how satisfied people are, and even how much money design is bringing in. Is there anything we're missing?
Well, we can't forget about business metrics. These are things like revenue, customer acquisition, customer retention. They give you a high-level view of how your business is performing, and they can help you see how design is contributing to those overall business goals.
Wow. There's a lot to consider. But I'm starting to see how all of these different metrics fit together to paint a really complete picture of the impact of HCD.
Yeah, and the cool thing is that these metrics aren't just for designers. They're for everyone involved in creating products and services, from product managers to engineers to marketers. Because at the end of the day, we all want to create things that people love to use.
So true. Now, the source gives some really interesting real-world examples of companies putting these metrics into action. Can we dive into those next?
Yeah, for sure. One that really stands out is Intuit. You know, the company behind TurboTax and QuickBooks. They've gone all in on human-centered design, and they've seen some pretty amazing results. By really baking measurement into their whole process, they actually have this whole methodology called Design for Delight, or D4D.
Design for Delight. What's that all about?
So it's really about deeply understanding those customer needs and then using those insights to craft these really delightful experiences. And here's the kicker. They rigorously measure the impact of their design choices. So it's not just like a gut feeling or intuition, they're actually tracking things like customer satisfaction, task completion rates, and even, revenue growth that they can tie back to specific design improvements.
So they're not just like, hey, we made this thing and it looks great. They're like, we made this change and it actually moved the needle.
Exactly. And I think that's a real testament to the power of human-centered design. When you have the data to back it up, another company that's doing really cool stuff is Airbnb. They're kind of masters of A/B testing, which is a super valuable tool for understanding what works and what doesn't resonate with users.
A/B testing. I've definitely heard of that, but
Can you just give me a quick refresher? Okay, sure. So let's say Airbnb is tweaking the layout of their listing page.
right.
They might create two versions of that page, version A and version B, with some slight differences. Maybe version A highlights the photos more, while version B focuses on the description. They'll then show those different versions to random groups of users, and then track their behavior. Like, do people book more often with version A or version B? Do they spend more time on the page? And by analyzing that data, Airbnb can make these data-driven decisions about which design changes to implement.
So it's like they're running a little experiment
Yeah.
to see what actually works best for their users.
Exactly. And they're using real user data to inform their decisions.
That's super smart. I love that.
And the cool thing is that this approach, this A/B testing, it's not just limited to digital products. You can apply these principles to almost anything. Like, think about a hospital that's redesigned its patient portal using human-centered design.
Okay, yeah. Healthcare.
Yeah.
That's one area where I think good design can make a huge difference.
Right. It can be so complex and often really frustrating to navigate.
Ugh. Yeah, tell me about it.
So imagine this hospital. They're redesigning their patient portal to make it easier for people to schedule appointments, access their medical records, communicate with their doctors, all that stuff. They could then track metrics like patient satisfaction with the new portal, appointment scheduling rates, or even like the efficiency of communication between patients and their healthcare providers.
So good design could actually lead to things like faster appointments, less frustration, a better overall experience for patients.
That's the power of human-centered design when it's done well. It's not just about aesthetics. It's about improving people's lives in a really tangible way. But of course, like with anything, there are challenges. Measuring the impact of human-centered design isn't always easy.
I bet. It seems like there's be a lot of moving parts. So what are some of the roadblocks people might encounter when they're trying to measure the impact of design?
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges is attribution. It can be tough to isolate the impact of design for all the other factors that might be at play. Like, let's say a company redesigns its website and they see a huge spike in sales. Was it the design that made the difference? Or was it that big marketing campaign that launched at the same time? It's not always easy to tease apart those variables.
Right. You really have to think critically
Yeah.
about what you're measuring
Yeah.
and how you're interpreting that data.
Absolutely. And then there's the challenge of measuring intangible benefits, things like brand perception or customer loyalty. Those are definitely influenced by design, but they're not always easy to quantify. You can't just slap a number on them.
So how do you account for those more fuzzy, but still really important aspects of design?
Well, you got to get a little creative. Sometimes it involves looking at a combination of different metrics to get a more holistic view. For example, you might look at customer reviews or social media sentiment alongside traditional metrics like website traffic and conversion rates.
It sounds like measuring the impact of human-centered design can be kind of like detective work. You have to gather all these clues from different sources and piece together the story.
You got it. And then there's also the challenge of time lags. Sometimes it takes a while to see the full impact of a design change. Think about a company that redesigns its onboarding process for new employees.
Oh, yeah. You might not know if it's really working until those new hires have been with the company for a while.
Exactly. It might take weeks or even months to see if those changes actually lead to higher employee retention or improved job satisfaction. So patience is key. And speaking of resources, sometimes the sheer act of data collection can be a hurdle. Like, gathering enough reliable data can be time-consuming and resource-intensive. You need the right tools, the right processes, and buy-in from the right people.
Yeah, it sounds like you really need to plan ahead
Mm-hmm.
and make sure you have a solid system in place.
You got it. And then, even when you have the data, the next challenge is choosing the right metrics to focus on. There are so many possibilities, it's easy to get overwhelmed.
I can imagine. So many numbers, so many charts and graphs. Where do you even begin?
You want metrics that are relevant to your goals, meaningful in the context of your project, and actionable, meaning you can actually use those insights to make improvements. Don't get caught up in trying to track everything. Be strategic and focus on what really matters.
It's all about quality over quantity.
Exactly.
I'm starting to see how measuring the impact of human-centered design is so much more than just like crunching numbers. It requires real critical thinking and a deep understanding of your users and your goals.
You're absolutely right. And finally, even with the perfect data set, there's the challenge of interpretation. Like, data doesn't speak for itself. You need to be able to analyze it, draw conclusions,
Yeah.
and translate those insights into action.
So it's like being a detective, a data scientist, and a storyteller, all rolled into one.
Yeah, something like that. But, the good news is you don't have to let these challenges totally paralyze you. The key is to be mindful of them, but not let them stop you from getting started.
It's about progress over perfection.
Right. Exactly. Start small, focus on what's measurable, and build from there. Even imperfect data is better than flying blind.
Wow, this has been a really eye-opening deep dive.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see how measuring the impact of HCD can really be a game changer, not just for designers, but for anyone creating anything, really. Products, services, experiences.
I think that's the biggest takeaway here. It's about empowering everyone to make smarter decisions and ultimately create better outcomes for users.
And it doesn't have to be this super complicated, daunting thing.
Right. You don't need to boil the ocean. Just start by identifying maybe 1 or 2 key metrics that feel most relevant to your goals. Track those and just see what you learn. You can always refine your approach along the way.
So it's like any good design process. It's iterative.
Exactly.
Well, as we wrap up today, here's a little something I want you all to ponder. If you were to apply these principles to something you're working on right now, what's that one metric you'd be most curious to track? Something to think about. Till next time.